2,802. This is the total number of players to ever play in an NBA playoff game. From the best to ever do it, to some players you've probably never even heard of. Among those 2,802 players, 164 of them never scored a single playoff point. A few of these players include a man named Fatty, Basketball Hall of Fame coach George Karl, and his son Kobe Karl, and a guy named Jeff Halliburton, whose most notable accomplishment was being Julius Erving's cousin. In fact, here is every single player to ever suit up for a playoff game in the history of the NBA, sorted by points per game. 2,802 players throughout the NBA's 75-year history. They're all here. Here's Bulls legend Alex Caruso in the 1,144th spot. Here's Bimbo Coles in the 816th spot. He's not really relevant here, I just wanted to say his name. Here's Horace Grant. He played a lot of playoff games, but wasn't the greatest scorer. Here's Manu Ginobili. He played in even more playoff games and was a slightly better scorer. But you won't get into any real all-time great scoring territory until you get into the top 150 on this list. Scottie Pippen lands just outside of that threshold at 17.5 points per game at the 152nd spot. Keep climbing and you'll find Kevin Garnett, Klay Thompson, Jimmy Butler, Dwayne Wade, Jason Tatum, and all the way at the top, you'll find the greatest playoff scorers in NBA history. LeBron James, Jerry West, Kevin Durant, Allen Iverson, and of course, Michael Jordan. With a playoff scoring average so outrageous that even in the grand scheme of the entire history of the NBA, the gap between him and everyone else is massive. This graphic took an excruciatingly long time to make. My head is pounding, and I hope it was all worth it, because there's actually only 2,801 players on this graph. There's one player missing. There he is. The one and only player to challenge Michael Jordan's godlike scoring at the highest stage, Luka Doncic. The kid is making history every time he steps on the court, and he's just getting started. One of many unbelievable facts about this year's NBA playoffs. Today's video is sponsored by Noom. Have you ever watched NBA players in action and thought to yourself, I really need to get into shape? It's easy to let the busyness of every day get in the way of your health and fitness. I am certainly no exception. But where do you start? Well, the answer is Noom. Noom is a consumer-led digital health platform that uses science and psychology to empower individuals to take control of their own health. Noom's unique approach on health and fitness is less about dieting and more about building healthier eating and exercising habits. Instead of just addressing the bad foods or lack of exercise, Noom gets into the psychology of why you're making these choices and how you can take steps towards making healthier choices. Instead of trying to tackle the challenge of, let's say, portion control or maybe a stagnant lifestyle all at once, Noom uses proven psychological and cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to encourage individuals to make small but impactful healthy decisions every day that can lead to long-term results. And by clicking on the link in the description below, you can take a free Noom evaluation to get one step closer to a healthier mind and body. It's quick, it's easy, and it will provide you with a plan personalized for just you. Start building better habits for healthier, long-term results. Sign up for your trial at noom.com/Jimmy. This year's NBA playoffs have been a non-stop thrill ride for NBA fans, with the occasional blowout that drains all the excitement from the whole experience. But it's all worth it, because we also got games where records were broken and history was made. And then we're left with another blowout that drains all the excitement from the whole experience. But aside from every other game being decided in the first 15 minutes of action, the 2022 NBA playoffs have been nothing short of incredible. So here are 10 unbelievable facts about the NBA playoffs that you have to see to believe. In Game 6 against the Pelicans, Chris Paul had one of the wildest stat lines I have ever seen. 13 for 13 from 2, 1 for 1 from 3, and 4 for 4 from the free throw line. The man didn't miss a single shot the entire night and finished with 33 points. In terms of shooting, this was the perfect game, quite possibly the rarest feat in basketball. But you want to know what's crazy? Chris Paul isn't even the first player to accomplish this feat in the playoffs. Among players who attempted at least 10 shots, 2 players previously accomplished this feat. Don Nelson, who made every shot in a 1974 playoff game, and Serge Ibaka, who didn't miss a single shot in a playoff game back in 2012. But here's the catch. These games aren't even the most efficient shooting performances in playoff history. That game belongs to Duncan Robinson, who had the most efficient shooting night in NBA playoff history just 11 days prior to CP3's perfect game. In Game 1 against the Hawks, Duncan had a true shooting percentage of 129%. Yes, you heard that correctly. Because Duncan Robinson shot so many threes and hit so many threes, the value of each shot he took that night was far greater than Chris Paul's, despite the fact that Chris didn't even miss a single shot. Incredibly hard to believe, but true. And while we're on the subject of incredibly weird but true occurrences, we need to talk about Demarcus Cousins. Because in the first round against Golden State, Cousins scored a playoff career high in points. Now, when I first heard this, I thought maybe his playoff career high was 30, maybe 35 points, but it's not. It's 19. Now, the reason why this number is so absurd is because out of the 674 total games Cousins has played in his NBA career, he has scored at least 19 points in 350 of them. That's more than half. And yet, somehow, he's only managed to clear 19 points once in the playoffs. His playoff career high before this game against the Warriors was just 15. Some not so notable players who have a higher career playoff high than Demarcus Cousins include Jared Dudley, JaVale McGee, Matthew Dellavedova, and Patrick Beverley. Now, if you feel like this year's playoffs have felt a little different than what we're used to, it might be because of the absence of two players, LeBron James and Kevin Durant. Because this is the first postseason in 17 years that hasn't featured LeBron or Durant past the first round. The last time we saw the playoffs without these two all-time greats, the year was 2005. Allen Iverson led the league in scoring, Chris Paul was playing for Wake Forest, and LaMelo Ball was still in diapers. Boy, how the times have changed. And times will continue to change because one of the longest standing records in the history of basketball just went down, and pretty much no one noticed. On May 7th, in Game 3 of the Warriors-Grizzlies series, Jonathan Kaminga became the youngest player to ever start in a playoff game in NBA history. Well, at least we initially thought he was. The official length of the previous record was held for at least 51 years. The night of this game, Kaminga was just 19 years, 213 days old. Now, to put into perspective just how young this is, LeBron James didn't get his first playoff start until he was 21 years, 113 days old, and Kobe Bryant didn't get his first playoff starts until he was 20 years, 259 days old. The NBA wasn't sure if Kaminga broke the all-time record since stats on starters and their age weren't officially introduced to the NBA until 1971. But thanks to a Redditor by the name of Tringle Pringle, we now know that the original record was set much longer than at least 51 years ago. Tringle Pringle is some sort of data tracking wizard because the man has kept track of starting lineups dating back over 100 years ago. And according to his numbers, Jonathan Kaminga broke a record that was originally set back on March 25th, 1910, when the Trenton Potters beat the Reading Pretzels 33-24 in the EBL Championship. Yes, there was once a professional basketball team by the name of Reading Pretzels. The Pretzels' starting forward in that playoff game was a player by the name of Hein Blessing, who was just 18 years and 362 days old. Which means that, as far as I'm aware of, Jonathan Kaminga broke the longest standing record in the history of recorded basketball. And I guess that's pretty cool. But the magic of Tringle Pringle doesn't end there, because the NBA Reddit wizard also discovered that in Game 4 of the 2022 Eastern Conference Finals, the Miami Heat's starting five combined for just 18 points, the least amount of combined points from a starting five in the playoffs in NBA history. But thanks to Tringle Pringle, we can look into starting lineups prior to the existence of the NBA. On March 12, 1944, under the order of Adolf Hitler, German Nazi troops invaded Hungary. This event is a landmark in world history. But what relevance does this information have on a YouTube channel about basketball? Well, Game 2 of the 1944 NBL Finals was also on March 12, 1944. And in this finals matchup, the Fort Wayne Zollners defeated the Sheboygan Redskins 36-26. And on that night, the Redskins starting five combined for just 18 points. Which means that the last time a starting five combined for just 18 points, Adolf Hitler was in rule of Germany. The Miami Heat somehow managed to play worse than any starting lineup since World War II. And that, my friends, might just be the most disgusting statistic I have ever uttered in my life. But the Miami Heat aren't the only team to go down in horrendous fashion in this year's playoffs. In my last video, I spent 10 minutes breaking down the monstrosity of a Game 7 the Suns put together against the Mavs. But what I didn't mention in that video was that the Suns actually managed to fall into the second largest first half deficit in the history of the playoffs. Trailing by 30 points at halftime, the one and only time a team had a larger deficit at the half was all the way back in 1956. But surprisingly, they actually didn't have the least amount of points scored in the first half of a playoff game. That record belongs to, well, the Phoenix Suns, back in the 2000 playoffs when they scored just 23 points in the first half against the Lakers. Despite coming up short on their run to defend their NBA title, the Bucks put up a great fight in the second round of the playoffs, all behind two monster series by Giannis Antetokounmpo. The man was doing everything in his power to carry his team throughout the playoffs, including grabbing every rebound even remotely close to his vicinity. Giannis' season was over 2 weeks ago, and yet he still leads the playoffs in rebounds by a massive, massive margin. In fact, despite not even making it out of the second round, Giannis will more than likely remain the leader in rebounds by the time the playoffs are over. This is absurd, and yet it's what we've come to expect from the Greek Freak. But statistically speaking, the most valuable player so far in the 2022 NBA playoffs isn't Giannis. It isn't Steph or Jason Tatum. It's Jimmy Butler. There's been 4 playoff games this postseason that cracked the top 100 individual playoff game performances in modern NBA history. 3 of them came from Jimmy Butler. At the moment, Jimmy Butler leads the playoffs in value over replacement, offensive box plus minus, total box plus minus, player efficiency rating, win shares by a mile, and win shares per 48 by a mile. The man is leading the playoffs in every single major advanced statistic. There's no real name for this accomplishment, but it's impossibly good. In fact, here's a list of every single player in NBA history to accomplish this feat in the playoffs. That's it. Jimmy Butler is playing at a level that only LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar have ever played at in the NBA playoffs. So it's settled. The NBA Mount Rushmore is LeBron, MJ, Kareem, and Jimmy Butler. And I refuse to accept otherwise, because these are 10 facts about the 2022 NBA playoffs that you had to see to believe. Hope you all enjoyed. And as always, until next time.